Hello world, Joe Strout here with another coffee break coding. Today I'm going to do a bit of a case study about a problem that I had and how I solved it with MiniScript and MiniMicro. Today I'm going to do a bit of a case study about a problem that I had and how I solved it with MiniScript and MiniMicro. I was thinking about doing a word game. I was thinking about making a word game where the computer selects a word at random and then you have to guess it. But when I'm playing games like that, I always get annoyed when I get to the end of the game and it's some word I've never heard of. And I'm like, is that even a real word? You just made that up. And I thought it'd be a lot better if the computer would show a definition of the word at the end of the game. So then you know it's not cheating. And hey, you can learn some new words. Now MiniMicro includes a list of English words in its sysdata directory. But it's just the words, no definitions. So that's not going to help us here. So then I thought, well, maybe there's a web service where you can call out to some REST API, some web function, give it a word and get back the definition. That should be easy to find, right? Surely there's a free service like that. Well, not really. Well, not really. I did some Googling. I found half a dozen dictionary web services, but they all require at least registration. The best one I found is the Merriam-Webster at dictionaryapi.com, but you've got to fill out this long form, including the name of the application, a description of the application, how many users you expect it to have, and all this stuff. Now, you could do that, and it's free for up to 1,000 requests a day, which is not too bad. Beyond that, you have to contact them and arrange for a commercial license and all that. So maybe another coffee break coding will actually do that, and I'll show how to use a web service to get information like this on the fly. But today I decided to keep searching, and I found this, WordSet. This is a GitHub project, which is an open source English dictionary. And you can look up any word and get back data like this, including the definitions, which is what I wanted, along with other stuff like part of speech and so on. It's organized as a bunch of JSON files, one for each letter of the alphabet, and within that file you'll find all the words that start with that letter. So this is something that we could use. MiniMicro has a JSON library built in, so this should work. So let's explore how we would use this to get to the definitions. Let's go back to the home page for the GitHub project. And I'll put a link to this in the description below. And if you go to this green code button, you can download a zip file and just download that straight to your hard drive. You get the zip file, you unzip it. Let me get rid of this. That comes down as a 9.1 megabyte zip file. If you unzip it, you get a file hierarchy that looks like this. There's some general information files at this level, and then a folder called data that contains each of those JSON files, one for each letter of the alphabet, plus one called MISC. And if you open those in text editor, they look like this, just what we saw before on GitHub itself. Here I've turned on a feature of my text editor called Show Invisible, so you can see how things are indented with spaces. And then they have line breaks at the end. So that's what's in here. Now, how would you access this from MiniMicro? Well, let's launch MiniMicro. Yar. Well, let's launch MiniMicro. And now at the bottom of the window, let me move this up so you can see, there's a couple of what we call disk slots, because they're inspired by old computers that actually had disk slots. If you click the top one of these and select Mount Folder, then you can tell it to mount a particular folder. We'll go to wherever we downloaded that word set project and say open that one. And let me move this back down. Okay, now if we do a directory, you can see it contains those top level files, and if we go into data, oops, here are all the JSON files. And we could just use the view command to check out one of those. Just another way of looking at the same data. And you can see these are big files, 137,000 additional lines beyond these 25 or so that it's showing. So they're big. But let's start with that anyway and see what we can do. So let's start by doing import JSON. This is a library that comes with MiniMicro. It's in the syslib folder, and it provides a function called json.parse. But first, let's get the data out of one of these files. Let's say lines equals file.readlines a.json. Let's just make sure we got a reasonable amount of data. Yep, 130,000 lines. Let's look at a few. Let's say the first 20 lines. And there they are. Okay. Actually, that's not a very good way to look at it. If we really want to make sure we've got good data, let's do this. For line in lines, print that line and N4. Oh, that would print all 130,000. Let's just do the first 20. There we go. Okay, yeah. So the data looks good. Now let's try passing it to json.parse. Now json.parse doesn't work on a list of strings. It works on an individual string, which we can easily get by using the join method. So we'll say data equals json.parse lines.join. And now we wait. The problem is this is a really big JSON file. And JSON parsing just takes time. So we wait. And now it's done. Let's see what we've got in data. Again, I don't want to print the whole thing because it's going to be way too much. It would just fill our screen. But let's look at the length of data. And then let's look at not all the indexes, because there would be 7,093 entries in this dictionary. But let's look at the first, let's say, 20 indexes. And there we go. Data has an entry for each word. Let's say we want to learn about the word amiss. We could say data amiss. And here's all the information about that word. All right. So this worked, but the JSON parsing took too long. And at this point, I went, huh, and started to try to think of a better way to approach it. Let's go back to the file and look at the structure. Each word begins with a line that looks like this. In fact, let me turn on that Show Invisibles feature. This is just my text editor. It has nothing to do with MiniScript, but now we can see that each word starts with 4 spaces and then the word in quotes, and then a colon, another space, and a curly brace. And that's always true. So we could find a word by using that pattern. And then a word entry ends. That's not a very good example because it's so long. Here we go, home words. You can see the entry for home words starts there on that same pattern, 4 spaces, quote, and the word, quote, colon, curly brace. And then it goes to here. It ends on a line with 4 spaces, a closed curly brace, and a comma. We can use that to pluck the word that we want out of a file. out of the list of all the lines in a file. So let's go back to our lines array. I think we still have this from before. Yep. This is the one that was from the letter A. It's these things. So if we want to find a particular word, let's just search for apple, for example. We could say the start line equals lines.indexOf, 4 spaces, and then quotation mark, but since this isn't a string literal, we need to double it. And then the word apple, again, quotation mark, which will double because all of this is inside a string literal, colon, and curly brace. And that tells us that the word apple starts within this file on line 84,937. Let's just verify that by printing out the line. Yep. Now we want to find where that apple entry ends. So let's do end line equals lines.indexOf, 4 spaces, a close curly brace, and a comma. And see what we've got for end line. Oh, I made a mistake. That found the first place that a closed curly brace and a comma appears, which is way up at the top of the file. I meant to search starting at start line. Okay, there we go. So it ends on line 84,966. So it's about 30 lines long. So if we were to extract just those lines from start line, we'll actually go start line +1, since the first line, apple, isn't very interesting. And we'll go up to end line. And here's another way to print them out on separate lines. We'll join them with char 13, which is a line break. Okay, well, it scrolled off the screen anyways, but yeah, that's the data we were looking for. Now, can we parse just that? We can, except that it's not quite valid JSON yet, because it's a list of things separated by commas, but not enclosed in curly braces. So we need to add the curly braces if we want to parse it as valid JSON. We do something like data equals curly brace plus those lines from start line +1 up to end line plus a closed curly brace. And then we could do json.parse data. Oh yes. I needed to change this list of lines into a string by joining them. So we can just say .join and it'll join them with spaces. That works fine. Now we parse that. And hey, we get back a proper MiniScript dictionary containing all the stuff that we want, including the definition, well, a list of meanings that have definitions. So we could do something like json.parse data, .meanings 0.def. And there's the definition of the word apple. So now we've prototyped this on the command line. Let's turn it into a real program, or at least enough of a function that we don't have to do all this work manually every time we want to look up a word. So let's use the code editor. First thing we have to do is import JSON, because we're definitely going to be using the JSON parser. And now let's make a lookup function. It takes a word to look up. And we're going to start by reading the lines of the file that correspond to the first letter of that word. So we can do something like lines equals file.readLines, word 0, which is the first letter of that word, plus .json. And actually, I don't want to do this in the data directory. I want to do this one level above. So from the top level, we would have to go into data /word0.json. And code a little, test a little, I always say. So for now, let's just print I read lines.len lines for that. And to test it, we'll just say lookup. And I tell you what, let's look up that strange word that I started the video with. this out. Bonhomie. Bonhomie is this word. It's a weird one, so it's a good one to test with. Okay, let's exit out of the code editor. Make sure we're at the top level and save this as lookup. And now let's run. Okay, and it reports that it read 136,000 changed lines for that word, bonhomie. So let's keep going. We've successfully read the words, or read the lines of this file. So let's see, what's the next step? Well, we should do a little bit of error checking. If that fails, because it can't find a file for some reason, we should just return null. So if not lines, return null. Now we need to find where the entry for the particular word we're looking for begins and ends in that file. So I'm going to say, as we did on the command line before, start line equals lines.index of, only instead of hard coding the word to look up here, we're going to construct it. So 4 spaces, and then a quotation mark, which I have to double because it's in a string literal. And then we're going to end that string literal, add the word, and then continue, again with a quotation mark, a colon, and a curly brace. That should get us the start line. Code a little, test a little, so that word starts on line, start line. And I'm just going to press F5 this time to run and test. Bonhomie starts on line 71,205. Excellent. Now let's find the end line. We're going to search for 4 spaces, a closing curly brace, and a comma, starting at start line. And we'll print out what it ends on. Ends on line 71,218. Grammatical error there, but who cares? It's just for testing. Okay. Now there's a concern that just occurred to me. Will this part work on the very last word in the file? Let's go figure out what that is. Switching back to our file, let's go to the B file and scroll all the way to the bottom. Oh, let's see, basis point, contributors. Okay, yeah. So it looks like the last word in here is basis point. And I don't think that we're going to be able to find the end of it because it doesn't end with curly brace comma, unlike all the others. But let's test that. Let's copy this word, switch back to MiniMicro, and look up that word. Basis point. And boy, I should have left the print statement in here. Okay. Basis point ends at, and this is where it got a null because it couldn't find it. So we want to handle that case. And that's pretty easy to handle because if it's the last word in the file, then the correct ending point is just, well, the length of the list, the number of lines would be past the last line. This would be -1, and this would be -2. So I think if we put in, if not, or let's see, if end line equals null, then end line equals lines.len -2. I think we'll be good. Let's run it. So basis point ends at that. And let's just check that line, make sure it's correct. I don't have the lines for B. Well, we'll just add it to our printout here. Oops. Yeah, looks like it found the correct word, 4 spaces and a closed curly. So now we can ensure that our start line and end line works for any word. And we're almost done. Let's get the lines just for this word. So word lines equals lines from start line +1 up to end line. And then JSON data equals curly brace plus word lines join together, and a closed curly brace. And then finally return json.parse of JSON data. And we're going to, well, we'll go ahead and look up basis point. But just looking it up when it's in a program doesn't actually print anything. So we need to do a little bit more. Or we could just test it on the command line for that matter. There's that strange word that I started the video with. Let's try looking up basis point as well. Yep, that works. Let's make this a little bit nicer by adding a, let's say, a printdef function. Oops. Look up the definition using our lookup function. If we don't find it, then print word not found, else, just finishing my if block in my function there. Else if we do find it, I want to print out all the definitions. So let's print the word and a colon, and then for I in def.meanings indexes, print I plus a period plus .def, if I remember right. Let's just check and see if that's true. Yeah, the meanings is a list of little dictionaries like this, and within each one, the entry called def is the actual text of the definition. And so now, instead of just printdef basis point, let's do, or lookup, let's do printdef. Does it really have the same definition twice? That's kind of funny. Actually, it does. So that that is an issue in the data, not in our code. It's got the same definition twice. That's a little funny. Let's try a different one. Well, we can just do it here. Printdef bonhomie, printdef apple, and so forth. Okay, so that just about wraps up this week's coffee break coding. I'll bring up the code so you can look at it while I wrap up. The important thing is to remember to import JSON if you're going to use the JSON parser. And then once you've done that, you can read the lines of the file based on the word, use index of to find where that word begins and ends, and then construct proper JSON data out of that and parse it. And this is super fast because instead of parsing the entire multi-megabyte JSON file, it's only parsing 20 or 30 lines for just that one word, which is really fast. I hope you found this video useful. Remember to like and subscribe. And go to... No, I don't like that. So that's it for today. I hope you found this video useful. If you did, remember to like and subscribe. That really helps us out. And leave your comments below. I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have or hear your reaction to this video. If you want to learn more about MiniScript or MiniMicro, go to miniscript.org. Here you can download lots of different ways to play with MiniScript, including MiniMicro itself. And you can find links to documentation and our community, like the MiniScript Discord server and the forums, where you'll find other MiniScript users. I hang out there myself, and we're always happy to help new programmers. You can also go to MiniScript Press, where you can find our cool merch, like the book Learn to Code in 30 Days, available at Amazon, and also some t-shirts and pop sockets to show your love of MiniScript and programming. Thanks for watching. And I'll see you next time.